Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody. It's nice to see you. And yeah, today I have the joy and honor of interviewing Nadja about walking the unmapped path, a conversation on experiments in new economies, community, and inner work. And I'm Nina Dauner. I participated in CU Money 2 years ago, and now I'm a very active member of the Conscious Tribes community, and I'm also the editor of the ConsciousU newsletter. And I'm originally from Germany, and for about 15 years, I've been living with my family on a remote island of the coast of Panama, which is the home place of my husband, and that's where I'm at right now. And yeah, I'm apologizing in advance if there might be any internet issues or something like that. Yeah, that's because we're quite remote actually. And yes, so I think most of you know Nadja, but I will introduce her anyhow. So Nadjeschda, or Nadja Taranczewski, holds a Master of Psychology and a Master Certified Coach credential by the International Coach Federation. She works as a coach, keynote speaker, and is the author of the book, ConsciousU, Become the Hero of Your Own Story. Through her company, ConsciousU, she supports CEOs, founders, coaches, and facilitators worldwide to create conscious tribes, aka a thriving collective in which every member does inner work, focuses on the bigger picture, engages in deep relationships, and practices conscious rituals. So welcome, Nadja.
Thank you, Nina. It's so nice to be interviewed by you.
Yes. So when we started to plan this interview, the title that came up first was From Exploitation to Regeneration. We then changed it to make it a bit clearer what we'll be talking about. But now, to start the conversation, I would like to come back to these original terms that you coined, or that you brought up. So, Nadja, when you think about regenerative systems or regenerative way of life, what does that really mean to you? And like, what are some of the core principles that need to be at its foundation to make something truly different possible?
Well, maybe let me start where we are at right now. So at this moment in time, at least in our neck of the woods, even in your neck of the woods to some degree, we are living in a capitalist system. To quote Peter Koenig, or my friend and mentor, and somebody who's been very influential in my work, to have some appreciation for where we have come from. Because at least where I live and work in Germany, of course, the capitalist system has created a degree of abundance for many people. And globally speaking, I think more people than ever actually live in semi abundant way, even though I'm very aware that this is, they're vastly different degrees of abundance. But I think in terms of minimum costs of living and what people make today, even though it feels so dire in so many ways, we're probably in better shape, globally speaking, than we've been ever. That being said, I do think that we are also now feeling very much the limits of the capitalist system that we have built. And that this system hasn't also worked for many people on the planet, because we're beginning to see now with more honesty and clarity that the system we have works because of the exploitation of many, right? So we have built something that has exploited large parts of the planet, that has exploited a large part of the population on the planet. And now we are beginning to notice the aftermath of that, even in the West, right? So the pain of this system that we've built is now beginning to reach us as well. And the way I think it shows up is that most people that I know feel as if they're at a breaking point right now. So the self-exploitation that is built into an exploitative system is becoming very clear. And in the past, we would say in the normal regime, what we've been socialized into, the way this worked was that we were all socialized with this golden carrot sort of in mind, right? So we were socialized into a framework where we believed to make a living, to supply for our sustenance, we have to work. And because we work, and most of us work in environments and in circumstances that are, at best not very meaningful and at worst soul crunching, we've also begun to dive into a system of self-soothing, which is consumption, right? So we've learned to soothe our pain through consumption. And then, of course, once we start consuming, this hamster wheel that we're into needs to run faster and faster, because suddenly our cost of living goes up. Instead of having one car, we have two. Instead of having one house, we might have two. We maybe also hang out in different circles of people. So the comparison upwards, who do we compare ourselves with in terms of what we need and what is a good life, that changes. So everything is running faster and faster. And I now feel that this system is coming to this breaking point, because a lot of people that I meet, we don't want to work in this way anymore. And the golden carrot that used to be there, which is, if you work hard enough, then one day you will have the freedom to stop doing all of that and finally start living the life you always wanted to live, is not paying out, right? So we have a whole generation now of people for whom this upwards mobility dream that we've been raised with, that I've been raised with, is simply not true anymore. Because if you are one of the next generation of young people, you will maybe never have enough money to build your own home or buy your own home. So all of these promises that were made and kept us running, they don't pull their weight anymore. Yeah, so I feel we're now entering a new era. And to your question of what is the different thing that might be possible, let me try to explain it again with Peter Koenig's words. So he said, the normal regime is what we've been socialized into with capitalism, but there's an alternative model. And he always calls this the natural regime. We could also call it a more regenerative way of living and working, which essentially means that instead of waiting for the one day somewhere in the distance of my future where I might be able to have enough money to then finally be free and do what I want, to pull that into the here and now and say, what if I was actually free at this moment in time to start following my purpose and to do things that I really truly love doing, and rather engage in the inner work processes that it needs for me to feel the trust that I can actually be supported by life in this particular way. So, and that already leads or sort of precedes one of the parts we'll probably also talk about, because one of the big blocks that keeps us from entering, this holy land, if you want, of the natural regime, is our relationship to money, productivity, and self-worth.
Right, right. So yeah, like you said, I think it's just becoming clearer and clearer to more people that we really can't continue like this, right? So we need to find new ways of like being in this world, and also new ways of doing business, because business is part of life, no matter which kind of system we live in or we create. But to be able to really come up with something new, we need to try out things, right? And that's often easier said than done. So what is your vision in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, what you just said last is very true. I think it's easier said than done, and I do think this is where the title that we did choose for this podcast or this interview comes into play, sort of walking the unmapped path, because I do think we have to be willing now to take the risk to enter territory where nobody exactly knows how things work yet. But many different people experiment in many different parts of the world with many different models. So it's not as if there isn't anything there to build on, but I do think we have to collect best practices. And the one area where I would say at ConsciousU, we're sort of experts for that, because that's one of the building blocks that I often think gets neglected, is that I feel this increasing outer complexity that we're all confronted with, and this volatility and this exponential rise in information and processing speed, which is also bringing us to a breaking point, right? Because our nervous system is barely able to hold on right now. I feel to deal with all of that, the starting point has to be inner work. So to manage this outer complexity, I first and foremost need to come to terms with my own inner complexity. I need to understand this first and be able to create sort of a map and create a language around that, so that I can, once I know this and I can speak to this, then I can engage with the next level of complexity, which is you, right? And I can begin to be more understanding of your complexity and more appreciative of that. And then we can enter the we, and that will allow us and enable us to build more resilience together, which I don't think is that's not a one person job. And we will find different solutions together. And when you ask me about my vision, that is perhaps really best summarized with our tagline of creating conscious tribes. And you mentioned that in your intro as well. For me, a conscious tribe could be any collective. So that could be an organization or a company, but it can also be an association, or it could be a family or a couple even. So the vision for these collectives is that they really become flourishing collectives. And that, I believe, also taps into what we're going into in terms of communities, right? That needs to happen offline, of course, with the people that we interact with every day, but also online. And the four pillars that I strongly believe will make this more possible, this shift into a conscious tribe, are, as you mentioned, the inner work piece, training us to continuously also check in with the bigger picture and realize we're not an island, and everything that we do as a collective does have a ripple effect in the world. The third pillar for me is deep relationships, and really investing in relationships, because in our day-to-day well-being, our relationships are pivotal. And that's also how we get to know more about ourselves, so that we can do the inner work needed to integrate what other people see in us into our self-concept. And then finally, to practice conscious rituals together, and to really develop a system of how we how we create rituals that carry us into a new future. And the take up, for this vision by organizations has actually sadly been more limited than I would have liked it to be, because I do think that it takes a very particular kind of organization to prioritize people development over what we've all been made to believe needs to happen, right? Which is, we need to perform and we need to grow. And I believe that the future, though, really belongs to a different type of organization. I believe that when I connect this vision of conscious tribes, for example, to the organizational space, there's really something about organizations I think will thrive who create spaces where well-being is not seen as somehow less important, or just a nice to have, less important than performance. I believe that these types of organizations, they will continue because they provide human spaces right? And rather than focusing on how to become bigger at all costs, they're really looking at how do we continue to exist together in a sustainable way. But that needs, an owner, a CEO, a source of an organization who's quite advanced and I believe in their own development and sort of their own practice of understanding success and wealth and all of these, all of these points. Does that sort of answer your question so far?
I do love your very clear vision and also the 4 pillars that you mentioned. You're very, very clear about what it's needed. So yeah, maybe you can share on a practical level a little bit of what new models of a fair and sustainable, for lack of a better word, maybe, or regenerative business could look like. Like, are there any experiments that you're doing or planning on to make it a little bit more practical?
Yeah, I mean, maybe let me share a bit about our own path, right? Because originally I founded ConsciousU with this intention of supporting organizations to become conscious tribes. And then realizing that the uptake of organizations was really way, way, way slower than I had hoped, we began to experiment with offering open programs, so open to the public programs, um, with the idea that instead of, already finding a semi-enlightened collective that then wants to go deeper with us, to actually just say, what if we open our programs to those people, those individuals who then, of course, are also part of other tribes because they're all employed somewhere, or at least they're part of a family somewhere. People who already understand that inner work is the foundation for healthy collectives. And and that has been a really interesting process because part of that is also the question of how do we finance that space, right? And how do we create programs that, on the one hand, feed us, but on the other hand, have a level of inclusivity where money is not constantly the doorkeeper that keeps people from joining these kind of programs and these kind of experiences. Um, yeah, and as part of that journey, we've also started building the Conscious Tribes community, which is on the one hand sort of a repository or bibliothèque of knowledge of a lot of different things that we've done, with Peter Koenig, all of the interviews that we've led for our newsletter, access to past programs if you're an alumni. But it's really more than that. It's really a space where I would like to invite people who are interested to explore more exactly this intersection of inner work and outer change. And I strongly believe that if we can practice inner work in a context of belonging with people that we may also run into over and over again in different constellations, it creates deeper transformation. And I think, Nina, you sent me actually a quote that I really liked. I don't know who that is from, so you need to talk to that. But you said real regeneration is the restoration of relationship. Who was that by?
That was is out of the work of Hospicing Modernity and Vanessa. It's not out of the book, it's actually from the AI that she created, but it's out of her body of work, so to say.
Oh, that's beautiful. No, I like that. I like that very much. Yeah, so you were asking about what are sort of viable models, how do we move into the future? What do we experiment with? I feel, ConsciousU and now the Conscious Tribes community is sort of one big ongoing experiment, to be honest. And as we're still living in a world where making money is a requirement because we all have bills to pay. And maybe a little bit of story in terms of how we've done things at ConsciousU. So for me, this vision has always been so important that making money was always secondary, maybe to a fault, because what that meant is that we, the 3 founders, so myself, my wife Olga, and Michelle Gauda, we have reinvested every penny that we've made with ConsciousU into the organization. So we've never actually taken anything out. And on top of that, I've sort of co-financed the company through the personal coaching work that I do. And I know that, you know, some of my more financially apt friends and business associates find that somewhat crazy and unsustainable. Well, and it is and it isn't, right? Because I still believe in this vision of conscious tribes, and I feel the project isn't done with me yet. So it's ongoing. But now we're experimenting actually very specifically with a new economic model. So recently, I came across something that I didn't really know anything about, and it's called community-supported economics. And it turns economics on its head because, you know, our normal model is based on supply and demand and profit maximization and growth. And what they are proposing is a completely different way of being in business relationships, which is actually based on relationships, on needs, on capacity, um, on resources that are truly needed and resources that are truly available. And what that means for us specifically now is that we are offering the next 3 cohorts of our open program. So we have one program, CU Money, that we have in English, which Agnes, who's also here today, is leading. Then we have a German cohort, which is led by Fabian Sabo and Julia Reichert. And we have CU Source that I'm co-leading with Tom Nixon. And we are going to run them with this new model. And I'm really curious how it will go. So that basically means that at the beginning of the process, you will only register for a fixed registration fee. So that's 149 euros. And then you won't pay anything until after module 4 in the program. So when you have a very clear sense of what have you received as value, how has this changed your thinking, your acting in the world, how has it been to be part of this cohort? And then we go into a completely transparent conversation about needs and capacity. And that means that by the end of that conversation, which is in and of itself sort of a very intense 2-hour video conference that where we begin to share and have this conversation with one another, people will come to the right contribution that is possible and feels joyful within their current context and honoring their financial means. And that means that fairness is now not coming from, which is a very, very German stance, to like fairness in Germany is everybody pays the same. And I know in other countries that's already not really the picture of fairness, but in Germany that's a very deep set belief. Fair is that everybody pays the same. But looking at people's economic realities, of course, that's not fair, right? Because if we have people in, you know, especially in CU Money, we have these vastly different realities where some of our participants live off social benefits and others run their family office, right? So we're looking at helping people to see that they can at least apply a factor of 10x to their thinking, sort of the gap between the lowest paying participant and the highest paying participant. And even that is, of course, not realistic because, you know, if you run a family office, I don't know, the factor might actually be 400, I have no idea, or even 4,000. But to help people now have this conversation and deal with all of the emotions that come up, I do think we're uniquely positioned to support people through this dialogue. So that will hopefully allow us to continue making the ConsciousU programs inclusive and available to everyone who feels called to participate. And at the same time, hopefully allows us to fully meet our needs financially as well. And we are now looking at that also being the future model for the Conscious Tribes community, where, this way of being in business with each other actually means being in a relationship with each other. And for me, that would truly be a lived experience of moving into the normal regime. The natural regime, sort of moving from the normal regime into the natural regime.
Wow, thanks for sharing. It sounds very exciting. I'm looking forward to learn how it goes. And I admire
Well,
your
you will be
courage.
part of the group, right? So you will see.
That's true. That's true. I'll be part of CSUs. And I admire your courage to really not only talk about new things, but actually try them out. And you just mentioned community. You mentioned it a couple of times before already. And because like part of the current exploitative system is the story that we need to get life done on our own. And not only that, but even in competition to others. And that's clearly not going well for many people because I believe it's completely against our nature. But it's unfortunately still the dominant story. So yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit more about communities, creating communities, because you've been doing that for a couple of years already, and some are temporal, like in the ConsciousU programs that you just talked about, and then some like now ongoing. You have the Conscious Tribes community, which has been around for a year and a half, or maybe even close to 2 years. So yeah, maybe you can share a bit more about creating communities.
Yeah, so maybe from a very personal viewpoint, I would say communities has been my life project, right? And I do think in many ways we always try to build what we need most deeply. And coming from a very sort of chaotic family background with a patchwork family and just sort of a lot of emotional unrest. I think having a stable community or being part of stable communities is just an incredibly deep need in me. So in some ways, it's completely self-serving what I'm doing here. And I don't mean this in a derogative way. I actually think that being more self-serving will serve us all well if we all do this in a conscious way to build what we need. So the main idea here is that moving away from the normal regime also means to move away from this over identification with our individuality, right? With our individual needs, with my individual rights, with the me culture that at least in the West we've now practiced for the better part of, I don't know, 30 years for sure. And with this individualism comes this constant need for competition, right? To have one over somebody else, to be better than somebody else. And cooperation so far is limited in time, and it's usually only connected with a clear goal in mind, right? So if I have something from our cooperation right now, then I might be willing to cooperate with you. But this story, yeah, I think we need to develop a new story, right? And I personally really trust in the goodness of people. I don't believe that story of I'm faring better when I just take care of my own individual needs, because I do believe we all have times when we need others, when support is needed, but more than that, even we all have the need to not be lonely, to belong. And we know now that that loneliness is probably the epidemic of our time. Something like COVID, of course, accentuated that, but it's killing us as people when we feel detached, when we don't have places where we can feel belonging. So I think communities are the fix for that, right? So there is a deep longing for communities because we are human beings. We're social animals. We need that level of connection. And I do think that people are very well able to support one another without getting an immediate return on their investment. Because it's a long-term game. You never know when you might be the person who's needy, who needs a helping hand, a friendly ear, or even a bundle of cash. So given where we came from, we are not very good at that yet, or not very good at it anymore because we're not used to it, right? We've been raised in a culture of distrust and fear, and we've been raised to fear everything that feels other, that is different, that is strange. So I do think that there is a learning journey for all of us to take, which has to do with slowly rebuilding trust in myself, in you, in a small group of people, and then gradually we move into bigger networks of trust. And that I think will move us into more regeneration together because it's a muscle we can train. And for me, the Conscious Tribes community is one of those places. And then, obviously it's not the only place, because I do think we probably need a number of these types of communities that we are members of. But I, for one, am very excited to see who in the community is also willing and interested in diving deeper into this experiment. Because as you said, talking about new models is one thing, but learning to live these new models together as members on eye level with everybody else is quite remarkable. And I'm very, very excited to be part of a space where access is not just regulated by money.
Right. Yes. So what you just talked about, like the Conscious Tribes community and the communities that you've talked about, they were like more of intentionally created communities, right? And before already you spoke about you didn't want to wait anymore until businesses or organizations would be like on a certain level to implement certain things, but you thought it would
Oh, now we might have the point where
maybe be easiest to start with individuals. Is that whole organizations or other groups?
we just lost you for a moment. Your Wi-Fi cut out
Oh,
for a
I'm
minute.
sorry.
You need
Is
to
it back
repeat the
now?
last question. Sorry.
Is it back now?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so you just spoke about the community that you created, and this is like intentional community creating, right? Like intentional communities where different individuals come together because they're all interested in the work and doing it together. And earlier, when we spoke, you mentioned that you didn't want to wait anymore for businesses or organizations to reach a certain level to implement the work that you were offering. Um, but at the same time, or I'm wondering now, like, because many people are parts of organizations and companies, and that's where they spend a lot of hours every day, be it in person or virtual. But yeah, do you also have any vision or idea of, or organizations who say, okay, we also don't, we see that the normal regime is not going anywhere, like it's destroying a lot of things. What could be a few first steps to bring more consciousness into organization or groups in that way, or what has your experience been about that?
Well, as I briefly mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I do think it takes a special kind of starting point, and that starting point has a lot to do with the person who is running the organization, right? And who ideally also is influential in terms of being the owner of the organization, or we would call that person possibly the source of that particular system, initiative, or organization. If they have that level of consciousness, if they have reached that place in their own inner development where, for example, their own relationship to their own wealth, to their own profit, to their own self-worth has already matured to a place where they don't think that growing bigger and faster and making more money is what makes them feel fulfilled, I do think those are collectives that might then be ready to enter the types of offers that we have, but obviously, that other people might also make. So the inner work starts at that place where people are ready to say, let's go on a journey together, and where being vulnerable in the context of your colleagues is not seen as weakness anymore, but as a tool to build deeper relationships. And I do know from our experience how joyful that process is, right? How less alone you feel when you can connect to people in this way. How more seen you feel when you know that people have it on their radar, that you might have a sick family member at home that you're caring for, right? It's even sometimes simple things like that. But part of this also is the commitment of each and every person, not just to want to have community, because we all want that to some degree, but to actually invest the time and other resources that you have to build these kind of communities, because they don't happen by themselves, right? So I think there is also a level of commitment where we really need to be honest with ourselves and look at what am I contributing to the communities that I'm part of. Am I just sitting there as a consumer? And whether that is an organization or your own family, I don't care, or something like the Conscious Tribes community, or do I actually participate? Do I engage? Do I show up? Do I reach out? Do I have individual connections with people? Do I use the public spaces that are created? So those are the things we need to ask ourselves. So as a starting point for each and every one of us, I do think that's a good question. In how far am I willing to not just want a community, but actually actively contribute to making the community that I want to be part of?
Yeah, right. And I love that you also mentioned that it can be small things, because many of us have a lot of things going on already. And the idea of now I have to create a community as much as I want, even that thought in itself can feel overwhelming. But it starts with many small things, like and planting seeds, which leads us back to regeneration, I would say.
You know, and it even means, for example, you know, in our community, Michelle is running these wonderful flow sessions, right? Which are community online spaces where people co-work on their own projects. So they all do their own stuff, right? It's not a shared project we work on. Everybody does whatever they feel they need to be doing, from designing a workshop to writing a book to cleaning up their kitchen. But we do it in community. And even that is creating community, right? So it doesn't mean that you have to invest all of your time and attention into constantly being in interaction with other people. It can be something like that, but without giving something, you're not going to have the community that you want to have.
Right. Okay, Nadja, looking at the watch. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I would invite everybody to maybe move a little bit, shake out your arms, or stand up if you would like to, and yeah, stretch and let everything that Nadja just shared settle in your body or flow through your body, and take 3 deep breaths. Yeah, and I would like to open up the room to those who are here today, and just see what's coming up for you. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah, and Jean-Charles, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for what you shared, Nadja. I wanted to share what it created in me. I agree with the importance of trust, as you mentioned, community, tribe, relations, generation, belonging, and so on, individual and collective strive for sustainability. But at one moment, Nina, you said, well, I admire your courage. And I agree that it needs a lot of courage, energy, resources to sustain. And who can sustain on the long run? Of course, heroes in the end. For those who survive. And the question that came in me is, from what space are we striving? From what inner place? From what vibration? I could say from what kind of consciousness? Is it fear, danger, scarcity? And so the question that came to me is, so what about faith? Because of course trust is important, but what about faith? And faith is at another level. It doesn't need courage, energy, resources to sustain. Faith is trust, kind of trust in the perfection and the beauty of all life and the universe. Faith is a trust in our own beauty, our own perfection. It's trust in the perfectly adjusted abundance in our lives, and of course, abundance in all polarities. But all these polarities, comfortable and uncomfortable, temporary, they all serve us. They all help us if we agree to open to it, really, to welcome it. And then I trust that joy becomes possible when we come from a space of faith. So yes, it's really what I wanted to share. What is the place of faith and joy now? That.
Thank you, Jean-Charles. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't really a question, but let me tell you what sort of resonant with me and what you shared. I do think you're right. It matters from which space in us something is being envisioned and pursued. And I notice the difference in me when I go into a place of contraction versus when I open up, right? So, and I've been through these cycles a lot over the last 7 years of, being pulled by something and then suddenly going back into contraction, getting all fearful, and then it opens up again. And so maybe that is the faith part every time it opens up where I'm connected to something else. I've never myself operated much with this term of faith, but there is something of a guidance. And when I said, I feel this project isn't done with me, even though on some level we haven't been successful, right? I haven't had the commercial success with it that I hoped we would have. But there is something deeper at play, and I do feel that. And I feel until that is complete, I'm not done. And perhaps that's faith. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Charles and Nadja. I will read something that Agnes put in the chat because she's not in a place where she can talk right now. She says, or she writes, I've been thinking a lot about the barriers to more interdependence and community in our industry, and with that she means industrialized consumer culture world. And I keep noticing that a major barrier is our collective inability to tolerate inconvenience and discomfort. We want a village, but only when it's fun, joyful, and convenient, but not when it's bumpy, demanding, and costly to our individual comfort. Also, because of said culture, we're collectively overstretched, exhausted, and low on capacity to expand our windows of tolerance. And breaking out of this can be really difficult, speaking from personal experience. So we stay stuck in our individual cocoons. It feels like a tricky chicken and egg situation that is increasingly difficult to crack in times of rising economic struggle and inequality.
Yeah, thank you, Agnes, for sharing that. I think you tap into a very important point. I do think to get to this place of true community, that is a huge step we need to take, is to find a different relationship with our own discomfort, with our being inconvenienced by the reality of other people, right? So and their needs and their messiness and their inability to always speak in the cleanest, most careful terms. And it's challenging. And in some ways, we've been so pampered of having the luxury to just retreat into our own little private bubble, that we've unlearned how to handle that. So I do think that's a huge piece of it. And honestly, I don't always find it joyful, not at all steps in the process, right? There are moments when I truly feel inconvenienced by everybody else's needs, and I'm like, I'm just not going to do this anymore. Like, this is annoying, right? But at the same time, I find it so incredible then to see, once we get through this rough patch and connection is possible again, I feel so much more alive. So I do think, yeah, there's a price we need to pay, but there's a big reward we can reap at the other end. Yeah, so I think you're right. We need to figure this out, and we need to figure out how to bear one another. And I know that's hard when we can barely bear ourselves, but yeah, and in some ways, I really think, what choice do we have, right? We need communities, and I do have also a sense of urgency about this, given where we're heading globally and what is happening politically in many places in the world, including again in Germany. I feel building communities right now is maybe the the single most important task, and to really figure out what are the 2 to 4 communities that I'm part of that are really carrying me, and where I play a caring role to different degrees. I think that's what's needed now.
Thank you. I would like to add something to that too, that I believe in the best case, communities are places also to share discomfort, right? And to, like, yeah, I think discomfort and the bumpy, demanding part of the communities, they might be more prominent if they are not addressed, but if there's space to bring these things into the open and then collectively sit with it, work through it, witness each other, I think that can be very powerful, as most of us have experienced also in some of them.
Yeah. And, Nina, I'm just thinking as well, you're part of a circle of people within the Conscious Tribes community that is very important to me. You're part of the guardians of the Conscious Tribe. So that's a group of, I think we're 9 people now who have committed themselves to be more involved, at whatever that means, right? It means different things for different guardians. And once a month we get together for a coaching session where I coach the guardians, and we just use whatever is in their lives right now to make progress in that together. And then every 6 weeks we get together, and I have the playing field to share with you where I'm at with the community, with ConsciousU, and get advice from you. So anything that I need is sort of front and center. And I remember one particular call a couple months ago where I ended up crying because I felt so lost, and I had no idea where this was going to go and what to do next. And I felt so stuck in not wanting to replicate the old models that I'm being taught by all of these American marketeers about building funnels, and then different access level. And then, the final platinum level is like people pay 10K a month and you will never have to work a day in your life. And, I didn't want any of that, but I didn't know what else to do. And it was so incredible to have this group of people where, none of you really had the answer either, but you were all there. And to be held with so much compassion and love in that moment meant everything. And I do think we all need spaces like that, and we can be those spaces for one another. Yeah. I would actually also be curious, because some of you are part of our community, and well, actually all of you in some shape or form. I'd love to hear, like, what does this mean for you, right? You, for example, you keep showing up at different things. You're not a guardian, but you're essentially a guardian, even though you don't have this official role. Like, what brings you back? Why are you here?
Well, this is I think what brings me back. I've been wondering about that myself. But there are two things. One is building on what Jean-Charles just said when he used the word faith. And what immediately popped to mind is one of the reasons why I come back is I believe. And I know this is always a very personal thing. And then I become a little reluctant to say that. I don't. This is one of the things I may have to work on. But I believe in what you're doing, Nadja. I believe in what you're doing with ConsciousU and with the tribes. And this is also addressing when I saw the question of Agnes. You believe in somebody in high times and in low times, because that's you simply know something that the other maybe doesn't see. So that's a key thing. And it always has to do with relations with people. I can believe in nature and the forces and the powers, but in my life, it's about believing in people and what they're trying to do. And that's the second part, is that I love us exploring, struggling. Actually, there is a lot of struggling in what and how to do these new models. Yesterday, I had a call with somebody. Monday, I will have a call, and it's all about what can we do to prime the pump, as I often call it, of these new models. And I'm searching. I'm still struggling. I'm getting a little concerned every once in a while. I think I'll have a number of years to go, but I have had most of my years. I have most of my years behind me, and there is nothing wrong with that. I look forward to what is next and curious and stuff like that. But how do we prime the pump? And and how can we contribute to that? So I believe in people. I believe in the cause, in what we're trying to do. I shared with some of you already on this platform that I am going to organize something, turning the tide from normal to natural in about 1.5 years, and it will happen. If I'll be the only one on stage, that's okay as well. But it will happen. But how do you indeed include and involve people? It's like you said, Nadja, and this is where I do wonder and struggle how to do that. How do you create the relations? And I actually have a lot of relations of people that are trying to change and bring about a better world. But how do you really prime the pump so it's gonna be something that really flows? But it does start with believing in people. That's why I show up. I mean, I know that some people just have to ask me, and I'll show up. I'm known for that almost. So I believe in those people, and I believe in what they stand for, the cause. I'm part of that, so to say. So that's why I show up, and now I'll shut up.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing, Job. Is there anybody else who would like to bring in a comment, or we're almost at the end of our time, so maybe even a gold nugget or anything?
I'd love to, but I've spoken already.
Is it short, Jean-Charles?
Yes, it can be short.
Go ahead.
It's
Go ahead,
about
make
the
it
notion
short.
of community, the word and the idea of community, because I have kind of a sense that historically a community is rooted in a territory, in a place. And I wondered how did it happen that word became abstract, that we can call a community just people interrelated through a website and virtual meetings and so on in all over the world. I'm building here a community in Belgium. It's a co-housing project. I'm I'm okay, I'm comfortable in using the word community for the project we are creating, but I'm quite uncomfortable when we use that word in, for example, the Peter Koenig community or the French-speaking Peter Koenig community. We had a discussion a month ago in the annual meeting from Peter Koenig. And yes, I wonder really what is that word, did that word became unrooted? And did we not realize it? Did we notice or did we not notice? And maybe that there is one of the keys of striving, but not losing our energy, but striving in a rooted way, that rootedness brings back energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Jean-Charles, that there's probably a lot to be said about real life on the ground communities, and I do think we're all in desperate need of those. I do still think from my own experience that communities in a virtual space are possible, because at least that's how I feel I relate to some of the people in my life. However, I also would agree they need a strong core, right? There needs to be a strong why around which people can convene, a bit like people around a fire, right? So that needs to be present, and it's a good reminder for me to really check when we go into this next iteration of the Conscious Tribes community, what exactly is the why that we're transporting, so that people can then decide, is that something that I feel attracted to and want to participate in?
Yeah. Isn't it much different when we can hug, when we can touch each
Of
other?
course, yeah. But I think we need
time
both.
together. It's
you
so
know?
much more than any number of meetings we can do.
Yeah, so true. And I'm very grateful for the virtual way. Otherwise, I couldn't be with any of you so far away.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
True, you'd be very, very far away.
Yeah. Marcus, is there anything you would like to share before we wrap up, a gold nugget or maybe a question you're walking away with?
Yeah, I really like this picture of the unmapped path, sort of, and to make this, yeah, also like within a company. I have the luck to be in a company who are in touch with Nadja and with ConsciousU. So, and I got there to this connection, and yeah, but also to make this like visible within the company, I got inspired. So alone that, yeah, we don't know, but we have people who are with us and have some experiments, and we can use this and find a new path. So thank you for sharing this, Nadja, and also for you, Nina. And yeah, it's, I think, also really the why of the community is a good thing. Yeah, that you like this. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Millie, would you like to share a gold nugget? Just quick before we end the call.
I'm still translating the thoughts, so I'm just, thanks for the conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. And Silla, you're in the car. I don't know if you can speak.
I'm in the car and I took my book with me because I wrote, there was a lot of questions coming up, and maybe I would write something in the forum. Yeah, you talked about you hadn't been a success, Nadja, and I would say, if you compare to what, because I really appreciate your community, and it means so much to me. And I'm the one of those with the are paid from the state because I'm a pensionist, and I couldn't afford doing many of the things if it wasn't for free. And I have started a practice where when I get clients, I say that they can contribute what they can. And someone is just giving me a hug, that is also fine. And I say it's the part of the peace work, world peace work. Yeah. And I really feel it does a different in people. They get totally amazed and saying, "I can, is it true?" And yeah, but I have lots of questions. But thank you, Nina and Nadja, for this talk.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, having been here and shared the hour, the time, the virtual space together. So yeah, and thanks so much, Nadja, of course, for sharing and keeping us up to date, also with the new experiments in your programs and the ConsciousU programs. And so let's just unmute, everybody unmute, please. And
Hey guys, good to see you. Have a great day. Nina, thank you so much for the interview.
is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think it's all been said for now, and it's an ongoing conversation anyway.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.